Good evening. This is Lee Einsweiler with Code Studio out of Austin, Texas. I'm here to give you a little video introduction to the public bus tour you'll be taking today. The project we're involved in with the town is an update to the comprehensive plan and the zoning code of the town of Amherst in order to produce the type of commercial and mixed-use centers the community wants. This update by Code Studio, with the help from town staff, a working committee, and a technical committee, will ensure that we plan for all the types of centers in the town and provide new zoning appropriate to each of those types of centers. Because we'll be using a charrette process in the fall of 2016 in order to do some of the more detailed planning for these, we will be selecting some centers within the town to study in greater detail. And while we study those and work on them during the charrette, we invite the community to be engaged and involved with us. And in order to do that successfully, we think it's very important that the community, the general public, be able to see things the way that we see them. So we're hoping to show you a little bit of material before your bus tour today to help you understand what you're looking at and what planners look at and urban designers look at when they look at the centers within the town of Amherst. So I'm going to share with you a number of urban design issues that are related specifically to the centers in the town, and later you'll get a chance to tour around with town staff and have a look at these centers and these issues specifically for yourself. One of the first things that's important about any given center is the site itself. The site that a center is located on is made up of a number of components, and first and foremost is lot width and depth. Narrower lots, as shown in the upper left-hand corner here, limit the options for the location of the building, the same way that a shallow lot without much depth also limits the options for where buildings and parking may be located. Where you have wider lots and deeper lots, as seen in the lower pictures, you have much more flexibility with regard to how siting of the building and parking will occur. Other elements important to the site include the size of the blocks on which the sites are located, and whether or not internal connections can successfully be made, whether with streets, driveways, or other connections. You'll see on the upper photo on the left-hand side that there are no connections into the surrounding area, which is often done to achieve limitations on pass-through traffic that might occur in neighborhoods. But because of those lack of connections, that typically means that people have to reach out to the main road again in order to move around within the area. The connectivity image in the upper right shows you an example of a pod of development with really only one connection to the major adjacent street system. And because there's only one major connection to the street system, each of those components back behind, all of their traffic has to come out at one location. This is much more problematic than a more connected system like you see in the lower right-hand corner, in which there are a series of connections to adjacent roadways and internal connections between the parking lots. It's also important when looking at the site to think about how access is taken to the building. How do vehicles get to the site and access this building? Do they, for example, access it from the front and park in front of the building? Do they access it from behind, from the alley, and park in the rear of the building? Does the parking back out directly into the street itself? And are there safety concerns associated with that? Is access done by pedestrians or bikes, or perhaps via transit? And when you come via transit, is there a successful way to get to the front door of the business from the transit stop where you're dropped off? The site itself may have challenges with regard to parking location. In a Main Street environment, as shown in the lower left, parking is often to the rear, and the shops are pulled up to the street. In a shopping center or auto-oriented location, the substantial amounts of parking are typically located between the buildings and the street. No matter what the parking location, when you have multiple parking lots, as is shown in the upper right-hand corner, it's very important to look for whether there are opportunities to connect those parking lots and keep you off of the main roads, allowing traffic to flow more freely from adjacent to the development. The next issues are all related to the buildings themselves that are placed on the site. So the first idea encountered here is whether buildings are set back or built to. The setback shown in the top left is 2 bays of parking and the building set behind it. This is a very modest setback. Shopping centers often have deeper setbacks than this. Or whether, as shown in the lower image on the left-hand side, the building is built to in a sort of Main Street fashion, pulled up to the back of the sidewalk. Height is also an issue associated with the building. In the upper right-hand corner, an image which is not taken from the town of Amherst, you'll see height has been mitigated by stepping back an upper floor. So when you have a mixed-use building with an upper set of floors that are office or residential uses, it may be appropriate to consider this tool to help mitigate that additional height being up adjacent to the street. Height is also an issue because many commercial buildings are single-story, and in mixed-use areas, you're in multi-story development. So as you replace single-tenant or multi-tenant one-story centers with mixed-use buildings in the future, you'll be dealing with substantially different heights in these buildings. Transparency is also an issue associated with buildings. When you have a shopfront building, a retail building that sits adjacent to the street, it's very important that high transparency, meaning fair amount of glass and open, clear, transparent doors, exist to attract people who are adjacent passerby pedestrians. If you have a use like shown in the bottom left-hand image, the transparency is lower because this is an office use, and the office use does not rely on immediately passerby traffic to make up its tenants. This is a destination use. Articulation of buildings is an important issue when you think about urban design. The larger the building, the more it may need to be broken up into smaller modules. The building articulation, unfortunately, for many is a simple box. And when those simple boxes get quite large, as they often do in mixed-use development or in large-scale retail development, then they become very boring when they are a simple single plane. In the lower right image, you'll see a very highly articulated building, which is broken up to look like a separate set of buildings in spite of the fact it is all one building. Site elements are also important to what's going on these sites. Some parking lots, for example, do not include elements like landscaping or screening of the parking lot. The lower image shows some parking lot screening which successfully hides the cars from the street. The upper image has no screening at the edge of the parking lot. Landscaping is also important because in Amherst, many places have beautiful natural vegetation on the few remaining sites in town, or natural vegetation which was retained during a prior era of development. And so some sites are actually forested in Amherst in spite of the fact that development is embedded within that forest. On the lower right-hand corner, you see new landscaping being added after construction to supplement landscaping that once would have been removed from the site. And as this landscaping grows out, the site will look much better over time. Site elements also include the streetscape, that landscaping which is right along the street edge. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll see an example of a street with not very much landscaping or streetscape at all. It is a green strip between the sidewalk and the back of curb, but it does not include street trees, does not include any other landscaping in that area. It's important to note that in Main Street settings where buildings are pulled up to the street, you'll often see what is called street furniture, things like benches. In this case, you're also seeing post office boxes, other kinds of elements that show up within the streetscape between the back of curb and the face of the building. Sidewalks are also an important on-site element. You'll see a shopping area shown here with a very limited space for pedestrians along the sidewalk. In this case, it is difficult to conceive of a very high volume of pedestrians using this area. Sidewalk connections from the street to centers are also important and provide pedestrian access. Screening is very important for mechanicals and for dumpsters, but screening has to be practical. So in this instance, in the upper image, you're seeing a series of gas meters located on the outside of a building, which could have been architecturally screened, but probably could not have been hidden behind landscaping. You're also seeing in the lower image dumpster screening. This dumpster screening has to take into account the fact that access to the dumpster in order to empty it and in order to place items from the business into the dumpster is very important. So we have to balance the need for access with the aesthetics of hiding the dumpster. Transitions are a key site element issue. One of the challenges in Amherst is that while deep sites provide the opportunity to landscape and provide fencing and walls, many of the settings where there are existing commercial centers and might be future mixed-use centers are very shallow sites. And you'll see here between the houses in the lower right and the adjacent development an example along Sheridan Road where a very shallow screen provides for really only a fence or wall and not much landscaping, and the backyards of the residential development back right up to the adjacent buildings. These shallow transitions are the toughest to achieve. Site elements might also include lighting. Here you see lighting that is shown, and the fixtures are actually full cutoff fixtures. These cutoff fixtures are very important to ensuring glare does not extend onto the roadways and cast light onto adjacent properties. In the lower image, you'll also see the signs are lighted with fixtures which are carefully focused only on the building and not towards adjacent development or the street. Signs are another key site element. When you have auto-oriented locations set back behind larger parking lots, you'll see often very large signs associated with that development because as cars pass by, they have a limited opportunity to see the sign, and a quite large sign is necessary. Whereas in the lower image, you'll see a set of pedestrian areas, in this case a Main Street setting, in which the signs are actually focused on the pedestrian traveling by and can be of a much more modest size. The final elements here are outdoor storage and display. Have to think about on which sites outdoor storage, meaning materials which stay outside all the time, and outdoor display, which are typically displays which are set out during the day while the business is open and taken in at night. When might outdoor display or outdoor storage be appropriate? Should outdoor storage always be screened from the adjacent rights-of-way so that we don't have to look at the cluttered and haphazard look of often those outdoor storage areas? One of the final ideas that we're talking about in terms of these sites is the land use itself. And the use here, we're not picking necessarily on a specific individual use, but on a general category of uses. In this case, there's a significant question about whether uses are auto-oriented, like the shopping center shown in the upper image, or like the actual auto-related use shown in the lower image, or whether they are more mixed-use kinds of settings, the upper image being horizontally mixed use, a series of adjacent mixed uses located horizontally but in the same setting, or vertically mixed use, as is seen in the lower right image, in which residential is located above retail. Land use issues also relate to tenant sizes. In the upper image, you see a single tenant in one fairly large building. whereas in the lower image, a building of about the same size is occupied by multiple tenants. The question of how to manage those tenant sizes in the future is another question that the comprehensive plan and zoning changes could get at. The final question about the overall development is about phase development and redevelopment of sites. We want you to think carefully about whether what you're looking at is likely to be redeveloped. We want to focus on those areas that have the greatest likelihood of phased additional development or redevelopment. The building in the top left image is a brand new building. It's unlikely to be redeveloped. This is not a site that needs new zoning immediately. Whereas the lower left-hand corner is an older building. It's single stories. There are plenty of land area, and this is a likely redevelopment target provided there is enough access to the site and there is substantial adjacent traffic. So looking for the opportunities for redevelopment is something that you can help us think about as well. Don't forget, however, that sometimes the opportunity for development is right on the existing development site. So in the two right-hand pictures here, we're talking about the possibility of phased future development. Future development could occur within a parking lot, provided that you provide a parking garage on the site, and those parking spaces that were on the surface are then replaced with a building and the parking garage. Phased development may also mean expansion of existing buildings and the addition of new parking elsewhere on the site. So thinking about that as you think about the development is also important. So just a few of the ideas that you might look for as you go on your bus tour today. You can ask town staff about any of these ideas, and eventually this material will be placed on the website for the project, imagineamherst.com, and you'll have the opportunity to download it and look at these sites again in the future on your own, or perhaps encouraging your neighbors to join you and have a look at these sites and help yourself to understand these topical issues that we'll be dealing with as we try to come up with a new comprehensive plan amendment and new zoning for the mixed use and commercial centers in the town of Amherst. Thanks for your time. Enjoy your tour.